Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I hope you're not bored of me. I think it's the third time I've stood in this room this week. I'm James, if you've never met me before, which probably means you've never been to a pub. But I've worked at ThoughtWorks for about the last 4 years, which I have to say is it's the best job I've ever had. It's absolutely fantastic. If you need to know a bit about ThoughtWorks, look it up. You may have heard of us. And here's some books written by ThoughtWorks people. Those are the obligatory marketing slides out of the way, so let's move on. Now, normally when I give a talk, I'm in some city somewhere in Europe, which I've never been to before, or maybe I've been there before, and I take a load of photos and I sort of take the piss out of that city a bit because, you know, it's not my city, but, well, hey, I live just outside London, so let's get some mood shots of London going. This is Euston Station yesterday when I was on my way to work, and what we're seeing here is you've got these two guys who are actually crowd control, funneling people down into the underground. Now, the fundamental problem with the underground, of course, in Euston Station is it's too crowded. Not enough trains go through. The throughput is not big enough to deal with all the crowd. So what do they do to that? Well, they construct crowd control measures, which is a classic case of not solving the right problem. And we might come back to that later. So this is how you can tell you're in the UK. In London particularly, people are standing on the right. Yeah, absolutely. In Bucharest, my God, the underground, everybody standing on both sides and people got off. You know, people were getting on the train before I got off and oh my God, it was absolutely horrific. Now, I promised Roy Van Rijn I wouldn't mention the football, so I'm going to break that promise right now. The bit that I particularly liked, this was in the Times yesterday. Song Heung-min hit a post, but the first half was dispiriting, "You're shit and you know you are." They sang in English. And the bit I particularly like says, it was so crisp you could almost feel the apostrophe. That's the Dutch fans singing. Absolutely fantastic prose, that, I think.
Come on, Liverpool.
I take no part in that. I'm a Watford supporter, so I'll be at the Cup final next week. Yesterday, Blind Ignite. In fact, was that 2 days ago? I can't remember, but then that's this room. And then, of course, like all conferences, we end up in a pub. That's Roy Van Rijn. Did I mention that he's an Ajax supporter? Maybe, maybe not. I can't remember. I'd like to know who this chap is. Is he in the room? Because I've got no idea who that is. And, of course, lunchtime today, I had to prepare my slides. That's not my beer, honest. Okay, what are we actually here to talk about? Agile is a dirty word. Oh, thank you. So what I'm going to talk about is, well, why do some people think Agile is a dirty word? Has it become toxic in some places? What it looks like when it is dirty? And then a lot of stuff we do at ThoughtWorks is actually cleaning up this mess. And I'm going to talk about some of the techniques that we've used that I've taken part in the last few years to clean things up. So let's kick off with, how did Agile become a dirty word? Now, I'm going to start with a quick pub quiz, if I remember my slides rightly. Anybody know what country that is?
Laos.
Thank you, it is Laos. And that one? I think Algeria, good. That is Congo. That's Timor-Leste, East Timor. Ethiopia. That's actually North Korea, but Wikipedia didn't have a map that didn't have South Korea highlighted as well. And that is Sri Lanka. Is that the last one? Oh, no. And that is... Thank you. Anybody want to guess why I've highlighted those countries? What do those countries have in common? They are all the countries in the world whose official long name has the word democratic in it. Does anybody want to have a guess at whether or not those countries are democratic? Well, I have an official source, which is the Democracy Index. Actually, it's the 2019 index now. Let's see where they come in the scale. Ooh, 126, 165... North Korea, the least democratic country in the world, apparently. So, those are the countries that shout about being democratic. Really? Okay, just for reference sake, and again, I should have asked you, who do you think number one is? Kingdom of Norway, number one in the list. Anybody want to guess where the UK is in the list? UK is number 14, full democracy. For reference sake, there's the USA. The first time I did this talk, I was in Belgium, and I thought, oh, I'll check Belgium. And I looked Belgium up, and they were like 40. I thought, oh my God, I can't say this because people might think I'm being passive-aggressive. And of course, oh God, yeah, here's the slide I was doing at lunchtime because, of course, I had to let Roy know that Netherlands are higher than the UK there. So, why am I saying all that? Well, I didn't expect this slide here. Okay, it's coming later. So, agile is a dirty word. And what I want to bear in mind, of course, is there's a lot of related words which are also dirty words. These words have become toxic. Agile, lean, Kanban, Scrum, MVP, prototype. In various different places, these words are toxified into some sense or another. So why does that happen? Well, this guy is representing my ThoughtWorks client. I don't work with that company anymore. The archetype is there. This is something they always tell us. I had that very statement said to me at the start of an engagement. We've been doing Agile for 2 years. It doesn't work for us. Okay, well, there's a fundamental flaw here. Agile is an adjective. It's not a thing you do. It's a thing you are. If you come to me, much like those countries that have democratic in their name, shouting about being democratic, if you come to me and say, our company is doing Agile, you know what? 100% of the time in my experience, you aren't. So, what does bad look like? I don't know if anybody's heard of a cargo cult. So what this is, apparently during the Second World War, some island in the Pacific, I can't remember exactly where, the Americans built a landing strip on it. And what that meant was aircraft landed on it during the war, and actually those aircraft brought wealth to the country, to those islands, right? So the islanders, after the war, the Americans pack up and go home. The islanders thought they connected the airstrip with the wealth. They thought if they had an airstrip, that the wealth would arrive, that the planes were somehow magical. And that's a classic cargo cult. What they're doing is following a ritual that they've seen without understanding the outcome that it supports. Now think about that, because a lot of what you see when people say we're doing Agile is someone's gone in there and said, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing, and do this thing, and they get no value from it. And the reason why they get no value from it is because nobody bothered to explain to anybody two things. Number one, what is the outcome we want from this ritual? And number two, why she, this developer, why she should care about that outcome. Okay? And think about that. You need to start from the outcomes before you start talking about those rituals. The rituals will give you nothing unless you understand the outcomes. One thing, as I was saying to this gentleman earlier, Scrum does not mean Agile. The very fact that when I Googled the words Scrum and Agile together turned up 33 million hits. So as far as I understand the way Google works, that means that 33 million pages have both those words in. Maybe I'm wrong. But they're conflated, is my point. And that is a bad thing. People think there are so many companies that will go out there and buy a consultant. They think they can buy Agile off the shelf. They go there, they say, oh, we're Scrum certified. Right? We had project managers that were Prince 2 certified. We sent them on a Scrum course. We're Agile now. Hey, really? This is an article from ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks Perspectives is a magazine we publish on our website. It talks about the rise of fake Agile. And what do we mean by that? It's exactly that. It's these cargo cults. It's these people, some other consultants, I'm not going to name names, but not us, that go in there and sell the myth that you can just do Agile magically. Doesn't work like that. Now, what does dirty look like? So, oh God, I always forget to take that border off this slide. Damn it. There's a big bang cycle of risk. This happens in a lot of companies, right? I'm sure in the past, I hope not so many people work this way now, but one of the companies I worked with last year had a 4-week release cycle. Okay? Well, that release fails every time, right? So what's the response to that? They put more testing in place. Okay. So somebody does a regression pack, and somebody sits there and tests it for 2 weeks. Well, what does that mean? Lengthens out the cycle, right? They used to have a 2-week cycle. Now they add on a 2-week regression pack at the end of it. Cycle lengthens. They release more stuff. More things are released. What does that mean? Well, the release fails. That cycle goes on and on and on and on. And it doesn't support Agile. That's one of the things that people need to break out of this big bang cycle of risk. There are lots of ways of doing that, but essentially I think if you read the goal, it always talks about shortening your batch size. I did some simple maths. I went to, in one of these meetings with my client, they were releasing something like 30 stories in one go. And I said to them, okay, if you release one story, how many things could have caused the issue that happens afterwards? Well, the answer is clearly one. And then I said to the guy, okay, what if you released 2 stories? How many things could have caused an issue in your production system? And he says to me, well, 2. And I said, well, actually, I beg to differ. I think it's 3. I think it's story A, story B, or the interaction between story A and story B. So with 3 things, you get to 6, and so on and so on. So pretty quickly, I think it's order of n squared. If you release 30 things, you've got something like 900 possible issues. That's never going to work. Okay. Oh, I forgot about that transition. Something I see a lot of in fake Agile is risk management theatre. By the way, there's a lot of words on my slides. I'm not going to talk to them, but if you just take a picture. I know I've had that feedback before, but I tried to trim them out, but I'm sorry I don't do a great job at it. Risk management theatre is a wonderful thing. It's when you have meetings that serve no purpose. It's when you have a process that may have originally been designed to solve a particular thing, to support some sort of outcome. 10 years later, it probably doesn't support the outcome anymore. Release management is a great example of this. When you've got some process in place that says you've got to go through all these checklist things to get a release done. How does that manage releases these days, right? But nobody owns that process anymore, so nobody's empowered to get rid of it. I actually, in one company, asked, who can get rid of this crap? And I got referred to this person, and it ended up going round in a circle of 13 people. Nobody thought it was their thing to own or destroy, so we got rid of it. I saw a meeting in one of my clients where they had a thing called a go, no-go meeting. There were 30 people in it, and it lasted an hour. Okay? And I was at the client for 3 months, and not once did they say no-go. Every single time they said go. And what I discovered by going to that meeting was the actual purpose of that meeting was so that everybody in the room collectively took the blame when it failed. Right? It wasn't about deciding to go or no go. It was about the fact that no one of us can get sacked if we all agree. That was the purpose of that meeting. So if you see risk management theatre, question it, get rid of it. That will be a barrier to Agile. This is an example of risk management theatre. This is Hemel Hempstead, where I live, just outside London. Now, I was walking to the town centre with my daughter, and I noticed this sign, caution, broken glass. Can you see the broken glass in that picture? I'll help you out. There it is there. Right in there. Now, what you see here, somebody has erected that fence. Not only that, but if you can look carefully, you'll see that it's actually attached to that metal railing there, and there's another bit of fence up there, all because there is a tiny bit of broken glass there. So somebody must be following a checklist that says, if there's broken glass, make sure nobody treads on it. Why didn't they just clear it up? Oh, there you go, zooming in on the glass. So it does exist. Anybody in this room use SAFe? I'm so sorry for your loss. So SAFe, I think, is the worst offender of fake Agile. Now, when we look at this 9 principles here, actually I quite like those 9 principles. I don't object to them. Apart from, if I remember rightly, yeah, okay, that one. I don't like that. Apply cadence. What I don't like about that is the fact it has the word synchronize in it. If you start thinking you need to synchronize releases, your fundamental problem is, and this is what I said earlier, don't fix that thing like the guys at Euston Station throttling the flow of people. Decouple your systems, right? That's the real solution there. Synchronizing is not a response to overcoupling. So, oh yeah, and anything that has a certification is something that makes me run a mile, but there you go, that's just me. This diagram scares the hell out of me, and I'm going to unpick it. This is what they say is the SAFe big picture. Now, when I looked at this for the first time, I thought, well, firstly, it's so confusing as to be what the hell is going on. But then I start looking at it because one of the clients I was working for was using SAFe. So what do I like about this? I like strategic themes. I like lean portfolio management just because it's got the word lean in it. But I don't actually know what it means. I've never drilled into it. A lean budget sounds like a good idea. If it means, okay, have this much money, then we decide whether or not to carry on or pivot or whatever. That makes sense to me if that's what it means, but I kind of think it doesn't mean that. Why there is a backlog at that level, I don't know. Enterprise architects, if you've ever seen my talk about enterprise architecture, you know I don't get on with those people or that role. Epic owners, really? What function do they possibly do? Anyway, then down here, that says coordination. Well, straight away, this layer, I'm saying don't coordinate, decouple. Right? Design your systems well. Don't design a crazy process like this to cover up for the fact that you've got old-fashioned legacy systems that are tightly coupled to one another. That is solving the wrong problem. I don't even know what STE means. Another backlog. Really? I don't know what that diagram means. And what the hell is a large solution? Don't build a large solution. Build small solutions that solve small problems. Moving on. Oh, economic framework. Again, I suspect I like that, but I've never drilled into it. I just think it's a good title. Now, down here, there is the customer. Why is the customer not down there with the people doing the work? That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Who thought that is a good idea? Well, probably the people that charge money for SAFe. More backlogs, more product management, etc., etc. Another backlog, really? Do these backlogs have like a nested structure or something? My God. So you know someone's going to be being paid to just manage those backlogs. DevOps, it's not a team, it's a thing, it should be down there somewhere. This is the bit that I hate the most. Does anybody work with program increments? I think the chap over there has done that. So this company I was working for, the idea with SAFe is that you have these thing called program increments, which is an aggregation of sprints. So the place we were working at, every 5 sprints, I think it was, might have been 4, they have a big PI planning thing where all the different teams say, we're going to do this, we're going to commit to this, we're going to commit to this, we're going to commit to this, which basically speaks to the tight coupling that this company was in. This meeting lasted 5 days. It started at 5 p.m. every night in UK time because they had an American office. So they had 40 people in the London office and similar in the American office. So they had about 80 people. They bought them all dinner. And the meeting went from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. UK time. So, I mean, do the maths. The costliness of that. I worked out the maths of how much this meeting cost, went to their CEO and CTO and said, have you worked out how much it would cost to decouple your systems? Because you know what? It's less than the cost of that meeting. So, PI planning, burn it. Decouple your systems. And I'm not quite sure. Every time I do this slide, I think to myself, I don't quite know why I put a cross on that, because it's got the word retro in it, so it should be good. Anyway, what do we think of SAFe? Well, I pity anybody that's forced to use it. What do I really think of it? We'll get there in a moment. My opinion of it is that it is, it's a comfort blanket for organizations that really want to maintain their hierarchy. The people at the top of the organization want to tell the world they're doing Agile, but actually they don't. What they want to do is they want to maintain their command and control hierarchy, and SAFe facilitates that. If you think SAFe is Agile, honestly. Here's my client again. This is a typical thing. We've tried Kanban and it doesn't work for us. We're a special case. Every one of our clients thinks there is some special case in their business. There's some snowflake that means that Agile or Kanban or whatever doesn't work for us. And he actually said to me, yeah, we tried a Kanban, doesn't work. I was like, okay, right, what are you doing now? We're doing a Scrum reset. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, we're doing a top-down reorganization so that everybody does the same process. I was like, why do you think that your 9 different teams with 9 different goals should all follow the same process? That's the tail wagging the dog. You need to reset and think about the outcomes that you want to get from what you're doing. This is my response. That's indicating that I didn't say it out loud, because he probably would have fired me if I did. Well, he can't fire me because I work for ThoughtWorks, but anyway. I nicked this slide from a guy I saw at an Agile conference. I think it's just a nice little joke. That's the stuff that good Agile should promise to get you, right? Those are all some of the good outcomes, right? But if you find yourself doing cargo cult Agile, you find yourself doing SAFe, actually what Agile ends up delivering is that sort of stuff. I particularly like burning money iteratively. I've seen that happen. And this one as well. If you feel that there is a blame culture going on, or a hero culture, in fact, that's a bad thing. I think I'll come back to that. Oh, sorry, yeah, long, boring, pointless meetings. Whoa. I had to leave my colleague in that go, no-go meeting. I sent her a text saying, I'm sorry, I've got to leave because I'm going to start shouting soon. Here he is again. We need to plan our budget. So you need to tell me what it's going to cost. Really? Do I? I don't think so. Just tell me. Anybody that saw my Blind Ignite yesterday knows I ranted about this yesterday, so I won't go on too much about it. Just tell me what the most important thing is, and we'll do that first, right? Then tell me what the next most important thing is. We'll learn from those two things, then we'll work out what the next thing is. You don't need to know what it's going to cost up front, because I don't know. I changed this slide because it had sort of two disconnected, conflated messages in it. I think my message here is that funding models are a lot of the root of all evil. They can be the enemy of Agile because, particularly in the UK in the civil service, I've worked for the civil service for ThoughtWorks, you get given like a chunk of money and said, there you go, there's £10 million, do that. And you kind of have to spend all the money. That's one of the dysfunctions you get in civil service. There is short-termism in the boardroom. People come around and change their minds and stuff, so that's a different issue. But I saw some stats, which may or may not be on here. Yeah, CEOs only last 4.8 years, apparently. Okay, so that means they've got a couple of years to do something, right? You look at the civil service in the UK, politicians spend, by my estimation, about 3 years after an election doing what they believe to be in the best interest of the country. Whether or not you agree with that is a different matter, but they think they're doing the best thing. Then they spend 2 years trying to get re-elected. So what that means is you have the thing in civil service that all these chunks of money arrive because the new person, the new minister for whatever, wants to leave their mark on it. Similar things happen in boardrooms, but at least they're driven by profit. And I think a massive dysfunction is this. A sure sign that your business is not agile and doesn't understand what it's doing is if people view technology as a cost. Okay, technology is the growth creator. Technology is the enabler of all the value in your business. So if you're constantly fighting for money to put CI/CD in place, whatever, there's something fundamentally wrong there. That's the thing that needs to be fixed. That's the root of all your evil. I really like this. It showed me, somebody forwarded this to me a couple of weeks ago in ThoughtWorks. If you go to that URL, there's a really good critique of fake Agile on, I think it's the US Department of Defense, yeah. I can see they can't spell defense, can they? Anyway, another sign of dysfunction is a blame culture. Okay, you see people doing, what do you call it, like a wash-up meeting, right? And basically the purpose of that meeting is to blame someone, right? And people go in there and try to avoid the blame. What you need to find is, and there's another thing which is, a hero culture is actually a blame culture as well. If you've got a culture in your company where people go the extra mile and stay till 8 p.m. at night, right? That's because they know that they need to take credit because they're going to get blamed when things fail. Okay? One of the most massive things we can all do in our companies is replace any kind of blame culture with a learning culture. People need to be safe to fail. People need to have the ability to run experiments. And I'm even post-safe to fail now. I say experiments don't pass or fail. You learn something. Okay, if my feature didn't give me the value that I wanted or that I expected, I test it and I go, you know what, I've learned that doesn't work. That's success. Okay? So, what do we do at ThoughtWorks? One of the big things I realized early on was I had to avoid using dirty words. I have to avoid saying Agile. I have to avoid saying Kanban. And this came to me in an engagement I went to a couple of years ago, and I got to this place, and like these other clients, it's like, oh, we're doing Agile. It's not working for us. So I go there and I spend a few days with this team, and they're not Agile at all, right? They're utterly clueless. And my colleague says to me, what do you think? Well, I think we were in the pub, and she said, yeah, what do you think? And I said, well, they're clueless. They don't understand Agile. And she's like, well, do an Agile 101 then. And I'm like, don't think I can do that. If I get in front of them and do an Agile 101, it's kind of like me saying you're all useless at your job. So I don't really think I can do that, right? These are all experienced people. They just haven't had the right guidance. So she says to me, oh, why don't you do a presentation and call it, what was the phrase she used? Kanban, flow control, and the theory of constraints. Ooh, that's a good idea. It later morphed to TPS, flow control, and the theory of constraints. What I was just putting across was these things. This is part of... next slide. The 4 Agile Values. What I wanted to do was get them thinking about the Agile Values, right? I'm not putting a process in place. I'm just saying, look, this is what we believe in, okay? I love the way the Agile Values are written. They're saying we value this over this, we value this over this. So I was able to make a presentation that didn't ever mention the word agile, but shoehorning all this stuff into it. Right? And if you find that there is some part of some of these that you want to talk about or talk to with your group, with your client, if you're a consultant, look at this stuff. These are some of the agile principles. Look at these things that aren't happening in there, shoehorn them into a presentation without the word agile in it and get people to change the culture that way. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. I'll be ludicrous to suggest it does. But there you go. When did I do that? July 2018. So that was about the third iteration of that particular presentation. And I've done that when I've gone into clients just to say, okay, this is what we do at ThoughtWorks. Okay, here's some of the values that we want you to think about. So this is avoiding dirty words. Here's my client again. And he genuinely said to us, no, we can't do MVPs. Our clients expect a full product. I'm like, sorry, mate, that's ridiculous. And I said, here's my illustration. We're in the office, and I've got a colleague that does this thing where he's always on Linux, and the text scrolls past so quickly, and I'm pairing with him. I'm like, Jesus, what the hell's going on, right? So I wanted to do the thing, where on things like 24, where there's a green glow comes off the screen, it indicates like a power hacker. So we did this picture. There's my friend Fu, and we got the green glow on his face from the computer, and we wanted to put it into the ThoughtWorks newsletter thing, right? So there you go. Great. How do you think we did that? Well, I'll show you. It's a low-tech MVP, right? There you go. It worked. And yeah, see, we had some good fun with that. So what I'm illustrating there to the clients is, right, you know what? It's an MVP, but it tells you what it needs to tell you, right? Nobody saw that picture. I think I might have sent it around a few weeks later, and everybody's seen this presentation since then. Here's another technique. Waste is not a dirty word. So you can talk about waste. And value stream mappings are a good way to get people to understand where they're wasting time, where they're wasting resources, where they're wasting opportunities. Here's one I did at a client. Essentially, we're saying there's time advancing. Oh, God, that always happens. I convert it into PowerPoint from Google Slides, and Anyway, my point is all this stuff down here is waste. Clients love that, right? They can understand waste. It's kind of a level of immaturity, because what I want to talk to clients is not the money they're wasting by their inadequate process, but the money they're not earning by getting value there quicker. But nonetheless, it's a good thing. So you can talk about waste. Here's another quick pub quiz. This was from which conference? Agile on the Beach last year. On the first day of the conference, it was England playing in the World Cup, the semi-final, which we lost, and I was very upset. Anybody want to guess what the waste is in this picture? I mean, it's not that, and it's not that, and it's not that. It's there. That's where I spilt my beer. So the value stream that beer was trying to deliver was to get me drunk and forget the fact that whatever. So that's the waste in that picture. It's not always obvious. That's my point there. It's not always obvious what the waste is, and it helps for us to map it out for our clients. And here I've highlighted in bold, actually, once you've got people thinking about waste, you need to then change the conversation to say, you know what? It isn't the fact that you've wasted 31 people's time in that meeting, right? 30 person hours in that meeting. That's not the real waste. The real waste is that you're taking so long to get your features out that you're missing opportunities. Calculate opportunity costs, right? That starts to change the conversation back around, instead of IT being a cost, being a value creator. Yeah, okay. Another technique, I tend to find examples of what I consider to be agile stuff in the press, whatever. Here's an article from October the 14th about Jose Mourinho. He was still Manchester United manager at the time. And it was talking about other coaches. This guy, I can't remember his name, it's around somewhere. The bit I want to highlight is here. Apparently, it's a revolutionary way of inviting the people to get involved in tactics. They review their own performances. He's got a God-given talent for motivating and explaining. I just think he's applying agile principles. He probably doesn't realize it, but I think that's what he's doing. So if you find stuff in the press, these are examples, right? That there are success stories out there. They may not mention the word agile. This one certainly doesn't. But go out there, find them. And this is, again, this is a slide I gave to a client to illustrate This is one of our standard marketing slides. We have this thing that we call tech at core. And what we're trying to illustrate to the clients is, you know what, you want to get to this state here. Tech is your business. But I didn't think this spoke enough to the client, so what I wanted to do was contrast with their business. Oh yeah, we put them there, which caused some nice debate in the room, although they actually agreed with us. And then we split it down into this. We said, you know what, if you want to be tech at core, you need to be on the right-hand side of this graph. And we put these sort of contrasting things there, right? Because we're trying to change the culture. We want you to be, you are currently process-driven. You should be outcome-driven. Yeah? So these type of techniques, we can get people to think about Agile without ever mentioning Agile. So once we've done all that, we start talking about cleaning up the mess. So the first thing we do is avoid the dirty words. Then we start cleaning things up. How do we do that? Well, again, there's no easy answer. The client I'm working at today, not today, at the moment, I come in and I spent 4 weeks doing not much. I changed a tiny little thing at a time just to get their culture shifting subtly. Okay, so it's a slow process. It's all about getting buy-in. It's all about sitting down, doing things. You need to demonstrate agility. So here's my client again. We have a strategy. Can't change it. Really? And you're telling me you're agile? Well, you can't twist, you can't turn, you can't do anything? Wow. I think I've got a quote now. Anybody know who this quote's from? Yeah. Good call, Mike Tyson. So one of the things we do with Agile is to illustrate to people about how they need to be agile with a small a. It's an adjective, right? So you need to understand that you don't set things in stone. You need to reserve the right to change, okay? Now, I've got a story. This is a true story. This is Leicester Forest Services, or Leicester Forest East, it's called. It's on the M1. I was working in the northeast of England one week, and for some reason I drove, which was an astonishingly bad decision. And I was driving home on a Friday, and I was hungry. And I know that at Leicester Forest Services, up there on this bridge, there's a KFC. So I was looking forward to a KFC, right? And every time, because we've stopped at this service station on the way back from stag do's, me and my mates, loads of times. So I happen to know that up there's a Burger King next door to the KFC, right? On the top floor there. Literally, they're next to one another. And it always winds me up that the Burger King has these massive adverts for all their chicken products, right? And I'm like, I ain't going to buy a chicken product from a Burger King when there's a KFC there. What, tell us about your burger products, right? So I'm looking forward to my KFC, right? I get up there, and there's that advert in the Burger King. I'm like, turn it in, right? I'm never going to buy the chicken from you. You're next door to KFC. So what happened this time? KFC's closed for refurbishment. Oh, my God. And have a look at this notice here. You won't be able to read it. I'll help you out. Still can't read that. I'll help you out again. Their vegetarian products are god-awful. Yeah, thanks. What do? I buy a chicken thing from Burger King. What happens? Best chicken thing I've ever had in my life. Never been to KFC since. Completely changed my strategy because I had new data available. So what we need to do is change these behaviors one by one. This book, if you've not read it, I recommend everybody in this room should read The Goal. The major message you take away from The Goal is you have a flow through your system. All the stages that we go through to put software live it's a series of dependent steps. Things go through it in parallel. There will be a single constraint on that system. There is no point fixing anything else. For example, if you find that it takes 2 weeks to flow stories across the board, the actual dev work, say, takes a day, right? But it was sitting in a queue waiting for someone to test it for a week. There ain't no point in optimizing the fact that it took a day. You concentrate on why the hell did it sit in a queue for a week, right? And there's loads of reasons why that might be, right? There might be stuff like merge requests or, you know how to fix merge requests? Do trunk-based development. Anyway, so the goal tells us in quite convincing terms that what we should do is identify our biggest problem and just fix that. And that's what I've been doing for the last month at my new client, is basically saying, okay, what's our biggest problem now? We have this every week, and we say, okay, let's just fix that. And somebody came to me and said, why aren't you fixing everything? We know that's wrong, we know that's wrong. I said, there's no point. 2 reasons, right? Why would I do a big bang release of process? Why do you think that's going to be any more successful than a big bang release of code? Second reason, theory of constraints. It's not going to be valuable. Third reason, if things improve or don't work, how do I know which thing that I changed is responsible for the success or failure? So change one thing at a time. And I'm working on a thing at the moment. I've read a book called The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. It's quite a famous book. And it talks about how genes are the thing that reproduces, not the organisms that host them, right? And what I started noticing was David Deutsch took this work forward as well. And he invented the word meme, Richard Dawkins did in this book. And he defined meme as a self-replicating idea. Right? We now know it mainly as these silly graphics that get sent on the internet, whatever. But it can be an idea. So what I started noticing was organizations have memes, right? So a meme could be something like, we don't do a release until someone's ticked a box, right? Those memes altogether define the culture of the organization. And what we're starting to notice, what we're starting to experiment with is identifying what the organizational memes are. They have value to the individual that they pass it from person to person, right? We think we get something out of that meme. It gives us some comfort. It delivers some sort of value. So what we're kind of experimenting with is saying we want to replace this meme that is destructive or pointless to the organization with this one that's useful. Okay? And what we're trying to experiment with is, can we just change the initial conditions just slightly, and then the one meme will naturally overtake the other one? It's an early stage experiment. I have proposed the talk into a few conferences, but I haven't written it yet, obviously. And this is a massive message. I've said it before. Focus on outcomes. I've got Greece from Euro 2004 there. And the reason why I put them there is no one cares that they were a rubbish team to watch, right? They won. Who cares? They won all their games 1-0. So what? Get buy-in from everybody. This is hugely important. You need to run workshops. What I've been doing recently is saying to my people, the ThoughtWorks people, it is not our job to tell these people what to do. It is our job to guide them to the right decisions, okay? So I've got a team of, 6 people that we're working with, and I'm sitting in a room trying to guide them to make the right decision. If I sit down and say, do this, they don't buy in. Okay, so we need to explain, start from the outcomes, get the process from that, but get them to come up with the decisions. Always do that. I use this to illustrate tech debt and why you needed to fix it. I like searching out stuff like this. I probably shouldn't be showing that, but this is a tech debt workshop we ran. It was really cool. The idea was, I can't remember which way around, the blue stickies were things that caused tech debt, and the pink stickies actually are tech debt, or it might have been the other way around. And we had product people in the room. Because what was happening was they were putting stuff in the sprint plan. 20% was tech debt stories. And then, of course, everything fails, right? So it gets halfway through the sprint, the product owner goes, all right, we're not going to get everything through. They pull the tech debt stories out. So we're never fixing the tech debt. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. The CTO thought they were fixing tech debt because he'd said to everybody, assign 20% of your time to it. Well, they were doing that. They just weren't doing the tech debt fixing. So the point of this was to illustrate to the product owners why they needed to fix it. And it was great because we found all these feedback loops, and the product owners are in the room going, oh, God, I'm causing my own problems here. And they never realized that before. And it was a really cool way to illustrate why tech debt is something we ought to care about. Because you sometimes have a hell of a job convincing people of that. I blogged about that. Yay. Cool. So what does clean look like? This is the goal state that we're all aiming for. So you get to a stage where, okay, agile is no longer a dirty word, right? So what does that state look like? What should we all be looking for? Well, this is a bit of a ThoughtWorks mantra. You need autonomous cross-functional teams, right? You need teams that are empowered to work towards an outcome, and they're equipped. They have everything they need to drive towards those outcomes. Architects, I like it when they're attached to teams and outcomes. I don't like it when they're technology specific or they're an enterprise architect, right? And you have to go to them and say, how do I do this thing? And they say, well, you need to call this legacy thing, you need to call this legacy thing, and this is tightly coupled to this, and this thing, if you don't do this thing first, it breaks later, blah, 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 blah. You know what? Why are we using that legacy? Let's solve the real problem. And I think sometimes enterprise architects purvey that legacy way beyond what it should be. An argument I always have, actually, I've had this argument within ThoughtWorks. People say, that's business critical, that software. And I always say, no, I disagree. The functions it holds, the capability it gives might be business critical, right? Your Oracle 5 legacy is not business critical, right? So pull out the outcomes you want from it. Every team that you work with, I always go in and say, what's the team goal? You would be shocked how many teams cannot articulate what they do, right? Get all your teams to clearly articulate a single statement of what they do. And a real bad smell is if they have the word "and" in it several times, right? That is not one goal, that is several goals. Sit down, go over the exercise with them, come up with a team goal, and come up with 4 or 5, or I think 3 is what we did on the last job, value statements, right? Depending on how you're going to deliver that goal. So, for example, we had one that said, we value understanding complex interactions over pretty UI, something like that. So some value statements, I mean, I shamelessly ripped that off from the Agile Manifesto. We value A over B type things. Helps you prioritize things. Helps you reason about what the most important thing to do is. It's a really great first step for any team. What do you do? Again, if you have a learning culture, you're in a good place. If it's safe to fail. Blame-free retros, I think, is the best part of Agile. So if you do retros, one thing you ought to be doing is reading the Prime Directive. I've got that on a slide coming up, which basically says, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everybody did the best job they could based on the information they had at the time, the tools that there's, and something else I can't remember. So it's important to say that, right? If you don't say that, people end up just blaming each other, right? That's not the point of a retro. The point of a retro is to understand what the team can do better, right? So it's really, really hugely important to get those retros working well. Here's my point from earlier. Yeah? Experiments don't fail. The only failure in an experiment is if you get an inconclusive result. So I really value that. Can people fail? Can you release software in a way that we can learn something from it? People get invested in software. People invest career capital, real money in stuff. If it fails, their career fails with it. You need to get away from that, right? If people have actual career capital invested in something, it's going to be a disaster. Here's the Prime Directive. Of course, because of, that's Captain Picard, isn't it, from Star Trek. We read this at the start of every retro, right? We don't think it's a retro unless you've read that. And I truly believe that that's an important thing to do. So, summing up, if Agile is a dirty word, whether it's in your company, whether you're a consultant, you go into another company, Agile is a dirty word, you need to understand the history. How did it get there? Look at those weird practices, those things like the risk management theatre, why have you got a 4-week release cycle? What problems were you trying to fix at the time? So get inside that history, right? Because to understand how they got there is going to help you unpick all that mess. Don't talk about it. If it's a dirty word, avoid it, right? Nobody will pick up that you're picking things out of the Agile Manifesto, right? Talk about culture. Don't talk about process, right? And just pick those things out of the Agile Manifesto. Use them as you see fit. You will find stuff in there that will fit the message you're trying to put across. Clean it up. Start everything going. It's a long process. You know, culture change doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a long thing. Oh my God, I've got cramp. Excuse me. Oh, ow. Ooh. And when your teams are trusted, trust is a massive thing, right? A great way of betraying a lack of trust is if your stand-up is when people say, well, yesterday I did this, today I'm going to do that. You know what? I don't care what you did yesterday. I just care about the story. So we do a story-centric stand-up, right? We say, what's happening on this story? Can this story get done today? What's happening here? Right, is there a blockage? I want to do it. Why would I care what you did yesterday? Right? That just shows I don't trust you. So get that trust in there. So when your teams are trusted and empowered to deliver value quickly, they've got the right goal. That's a great place to be. And everything should be happy. So that's Woody's all. that apparently was one of the inventors of extreme programming. I met him at a conference and I got a selfie. So Agile isn't about the process, right? It is about facilitating useful outcomes. I can't say the word outcome enough. Start from your outcomes, work out how to get to those outcomes. Outcome is always more important than process. If you're being driven by process, the tail is wagging the dog. It's definitely about culture and values. It's about the people, right? I think that's one of the things in the Agile Manifesto, talks about people over process, I think is the way it's expressed in the Agile Manifesto. So it's not a dirty word when you understand what it means. And thank you very much for listening. Can I take any questions? Has anybody got any questions? I've got 5 minutes left according to that monitor. Yes?
Why do you say that good reviews is a waste of time?
Somebody always asks that. I love that question. Why are code reviews a waste of time? Because they never deliver the value or the outcome they're intended to deliver. In my experience, okay, if you're working on an open source project, distributed team, I guess they're probably necessary, right? What they should be achieving is sharing context and code quality, right? They never do that. A code review spawns a massive thread of conversation where this person says, oh, you've used a for loop there, you should have used this construct instead. Or you've used the wrong thing, you've put the brace in the wrong place. Our code things is that. You know what? Stick a linting tool in place, right? Nobody ever makes a comment that says there's a missing test. Or nobody ever makes a comment that says there's the intent of this code is not clear, right? So there are very, very rarely useful outcomes there. I agree that sometimes code reviews can be useful, but I would always sit down with the team and pick out the outcomes, right? If we're looking for shared context, if we're looking for code quality, you know what? There's better ways of doing that. There's pairing, for example.
I do think it's come a long way. It used to be, oh, change it, you block the code here.
Yeah.
Reduce it. We don't care about that anymore.
Exactly. I mean, there's a linting tool for that.
Yeah, there is. But I do see people kind of going, yeah, if I came back to this, I wouldn't understand it. Can you make it clear and put context in adding tests? So I think it is doing that.
I accept that point, and I think code reviews can be useful if you talk about the outcomes you want from them. But all too often I've seen them being useless. And I know that was a sweeping generalization. And when I put that in that slide originally, it was exactly to provoke this discussion at that client because we wanted them to move away from the kind of branching model into a trunk-based development with pairing. So I deliberately left that there to be sort of disingenuous, and I wanted the client to start this conversation. Cool. Yes, sir. Okay, the question was, talked about the stand-ups. Can I elaborate on that? So the traditional way of a stand-up is every person in the team says, yesterday I did this, today I'm going to do this, and I might have these problems. We do something called walk the wall. So you've got the physical wall. We always have physical walls in ThoughtWorks. You start on the right-hand side, and you say, okay, what's in the done column? This moved yesterday. Has it been released? Excellent. Then you go to whatever the next column is, whether you've got a QA column, whatever. You point to each story in turn and say, who's working on that? What's going on with this story? Can we get that done today? Is it blocked? Do you need any help? Have you got everything you need to do it? So you move down basically across the board, right to left, and it's story-centric. It's not person-centric, right? Because I, as the product owner or as the project manager, as I'm sometimes called these days, I care about the stories getting over the line. So it's about talking about the stories, not about the people. Yes, sir? Yes. Okay, so question is, do we use Jira as well? Yes, because I personally think Jira is, you need a story repository, right? Because you can't capture everything on a card. I do use Jira, but what I hate is when people try to use a tool like Jira to modify people's behaviors and they encode what they think is a sensible workflow in there and it starts imposing extra overhead on the devs. So I dislike intensely when it starts to do that, but I totally agree that there needs to be a story repository, and we use it for that.
So you keep the board simple, and then you'll have the physical one just to sort of reinforce.
Yes. So the physical wall is so that we can visualize it, so that people can walk past and say, "Where's my story?" and so on. So that's the function that fulfills, and it's something to talk to in stand-up, and you can actually see the progress. Yes. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Yeah. Uh-huh. To improve the wall? So I think the question was, have I got suggestions on improving the process? The only thing I can speak to that in generality is read the goal and always just every week say, what's our biggest problem, right? Optimize for flow. Okay, you want things flowing across the wall quickly and just always say to yourself, what's our biggest problem? How do we fix that? My time's up. Can I take one more question or do we need to stop? Sorry, what? So this lady down here, yes? Yes. Okay, the question is how do you balance all that against security teams, compliance teams, and so on? I would embed them within the team and make it the team's responsibility. We manage things called cross-cutting concerns, cross-functional requirements. Give them security knowledge. Empower them. How long is a piece of string? You need to give every team as much as it needs to fulfill its work, right? So perhaps you can use service mesh, something like that, to impose security. To be honest, I'm not a security expert, so I can't answer that. But in generality, and I know we've only got 45 minutes, I have to generalize, you're right, but you know what's true about all generalizations? They're all true. So just concentrate on the biggest problem, fix it, and move on. That's my best message about continual improvement. Thanks very much, everybody.